Yeah, can you
Okay,
see? Okay, perfect.
perfect. Yes, we can see you.
So fantastic. So let me quickly start, right? So this is what happens when some things are set and I couldn't turn on my video and something was going wrong. So every day, quickly see what can be done and move quickly, right? So let's look at, in the interest of time, um, what goes behind hiring a product leader. And when I say product leader, I'm not differentiating between an associate product manager, senior product manager, or group product manager, or a director or VP, right? All product professionals are leaders in their own respective scope of work or space, because you would have heard this over and again, which is um, you're the CEO of the product. Now, when you say CEO of a product, it's easy and it sounds nice and fancy, but there's a lot of work that goes. A lot of things come your way, which you're not anticipating, right? So we'll cover some of those aspects as part of this, right? And this is not just my specific view alone. This is something that I've heard from others as well. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, um, not everything applies. It depends on the hiring manager. It depends on the culture of the organization. It depends on the product. It depends on um, what the maturity of the product is, where is it in the life cycle, and so on. Okay. Now with that, there are different types of product leaders, right? Inbound and outbound. What is an inbound and outbound? When I say inbound and outbound, it's about, though I don't like the term inbound and outbound personally, but inbound product managers are the ones who are working very closely with engineering. I would put it, most of their time is spent working with engineering. Of course, it's true that you cannot just be working with engineering and building product. Customers' feedback needs to come, partners, analysts, and so many other channels through which feedback comes in. So you can't really be an inbound alone, in my view. But many organizations have that categorized as inbound and outbound product managers. Inbound focuses more on engineering, outbound focuses more on enabling the field, working with analysts, working with the sales and field, and ensuring also the feedback loop in terms of bringing that into the inbound role. So inbound, outbound very closely working together. Now, when you're hiring for inbound and outbound, the requirements are very different. And it comes, some of it is based on experience, where the person is, what the interests are, what is the domain experience, and so on. Okay, in some cases, not in all. Now, some of these outbound product manager or product leader roles may also be called as product marketing in some organizations, where the product marketing is actually doing the outbound role of enabling the field, creating collaterals, creating the demo content, working with analysts, and so on. So it may vary from organization to organization, but in essence, you get my idea, right? Someone who focuses with the engineering team most of the time. So if you're looking at moving from an engineering role to a product leader role, you may first end up in inbound. It may be hard to get into outbound because that's been the background, right? Someone who comes with a strong domain experience, let's say having worked with on the consulting side on a specific domain, have a lot of functional experience, not much from a engineering side, might have been engaged in some of the implementation as part of the consulting services and so on, as part of system integrators or the big fours or others. Then outbound may be a pretty good fit because you bring in that domain experience and so on. So these are some of the things that goes behind from a hiring manager perspective. Okay, what are we hiring? What is it required? So it's important for you as a candidate to look at what your interests are, where you want to go, and apply to relevant ones. Because, for example, if you have two positions in an organization, right? Let's say Acme is the organization to which you're applying. If you apply where your fit is for an outbound role, but if you apply for an inbound role, you may get rejected. Now, because you've got rejected into that particular role, it might be hard for the outbound role, outbound hiring manager to consider, because they will look at, okay, you've already applied for these roles and got rejected. We did not screen. So it will say, yeah, 10 applications, 10 different roles you have applied, and everyone is rejected. So the hiring manager thinks everyone is rejected. What may be the reason? Now it depends on the hiring manager to say, oh, the person, he or she has applied to all the inbound roles. Maybe that's why he got rejected. But unfortunately, not a lot of time is there for the hiring manager to screen these things, right? So for example, I'll give you, typically in some of the organizations, it's about 900 odd resumes for 3 or 4 positions that come in. It's hard to prioritize, and each hiring manager uses different mechanisms to go ahead and filter. So what happens is resume becomes really important, and what you write in the resume becomes really important from a screening point of view. Once you get screened, yeah, then it depends on mostly yourself to crack it. So that's an important aspect, focusing on your resume, keywords, because that's what the hiring manager is going to look for while screening. Now, there are 2 types of screening. One is the hiring manager is looking at each of each resume for a second or 2 seconds, and what impression it gives. So, for example, if you have critical keywords, things that you want to highlight, put it in the first page, bold it. It should be easy for them. All they have is 1 or 2 seconds. If they like it, they will pay more attention and go to the second page or read. Otherwise, it will be rejected. So it becomes important of how you structure your resume to get through the screening process and apply to not everything that you see. Be focused on what you want, understand what is written in the job description, and apply. If you don't know much, try to get some help within some contacts within the organization to understand what the role is, and you can decide what may be a fit for you. Now, this will change if you're applying, if it's a platform infrastructure, tooling kind of products, then we're talking about you should have an experience somewhere on that line. If from an engineer, if you were an engineer, if you were an architect, if you were playing a QA role, and others, right? Focused on these. It could be you've run a startup. It could be you worked in a large organization. It could be any of those. But if your expertise is in this, then they may see fit from a platform infrastructure and tooling perspective. Again, there's no hard rule. Things have changed and things are evolving and things are changing a lot, which means a lot of things can move things around. But I'm saying with the volume of resumes and candidates that are available, it becomes hard for the hiring manager to specifically filter and get to the right. I know for a fact hiring managers usually feel, oh, maybe because of my filtering, I've missed some candidate who could have been really good, but there's no choice. There should be some mechanism. So this is a good scope for HR portals and resume applications and so on to tap this from a solving a problem perspective, right? Good opportunities for products if you want to be in that space. And there are product managers who focused on building products on top of platform, or it's a mix of both, right? What we call as apps. It could be mobile apps, it could be e-commerce, or it could be apps for specific areas. It could be enterprise software, it could be products for small and medium businesses, whatever that may be. That requires a different type of mindset compared to platform thinking. So you also have to look for yourself where you want to be to start with, and in the future where you want to be. Now, future is is slightly tricky because first thing you need to crack and get in. So the more you can align with what you have done in the past, it'll be easier for you to get into similar roles. So for example, if your exposure has been more on the more technical side, building platform capabilities, then you have a better chance of cracking it as part of the platform product roles. And then from there, you can move to any other direction. You can move to, app side, you can move to outbound, you can move to any other areas, right? It's about the first transition becomes important there. But the next one is, there are many teams, product teams, which have UX, user experience and design part of the product organization. If you have design background, if you have a design bend, right, design mind, then that adds a significant value of where you may fit. Product managers, product leaders, always good to have some UX background in my view. Though there are designers, there may be designers in the organization, if it's a large organization. If it's a smaller organization, product manager doubles up as a designer. You're working on the design, you're creating the wireframe, there's not much time for doing a lot of detailed research for over a year and do things, right? You're busy releasing products, validating it as part of the startup journey. In a large organization, you may have different functions there. So it is important again to know, okay, what is the organization you're applying to? What is the size of the organization? Whether they have a UX function or a design function, whether it will be an expectation for you to develop as someone who knows design. It always is a plus, irrespective of the size of the organization, right? So know about design, have a point of opinion or point of view about different applications that's out there, because some of these questions will come up, right? So for example, the most frequently asked questions would be, give me an example of a product that you love. And then they will go more into, okay, tell me what can be improved, tell me what the design, what you like, what you don't like. If you were a product manager, what could have been done, right? So you would need to have some of these examples handy and thought through of, okay, what can be solved in those products that are existing if you are a product manager. If you were to take that product and enter into new market and increase the revenue 2 times, what are things that you would do? So some of these questions may come up. It depends on whether it's inbound or outbound. Questions would vary. And that's why it's important to know these roles specifically and what the expectations are for these. And of course, the product manager is a pretty broad term now, with FMCG and many others calling product managers brand managers. And what happens over there is very different from the software side. Okay, there are a lot of common elements, but at the same time, there are the dynamics are different, because if you're launching a car, it's not as simple as launching a software where you can easily change, you can pull out. It's not like an e-commerce site where you can do an A/B testing and change a button tomorrow or the next hour. It's not easy. So it's a long process in those lines. So, some of the, one of the questions that will come up in the interviews is, whom do you work with today? What has been your experience? And this is an important one for product leaders. Believe it or not, you will work with pretty much everyone in the organization, everyone. It's not just engineering. It's not just developer. It's just not the architect. It's just not people who are testing design team. You have to be a great hustler. You have to be a great collaborator. You need to have patience. You need to know how to manage your stakeholders. And these are the questions that will come up in your interview, which will try to assess these things, right? What has been your experience? What type of person are you from a personality point of view, right? Because it is important that you are required to work with different people. And when you're working with different people, it is challenging. It's not simple. And it is across the hierarchy. At one side, you may be working with a developer. or a development manager, or an architect, or a CTO, or actually a chief product officer, or VP of sales, or in fact, you're CEO of the company internally. At the same time, you're working with a C-suite of a partner or a customer where you're trying to influence the product buying decision, right? So it is important to understand these things from a role perspective. And again, there's inbound, outbound, and what the role is, what is the expectation of the organization, and would you be able to do this? So look for questions that are trying to get an example of this experience in the past and personality type. Some of the questions that could come to check some of these things could be, tell me an instance of how you collaborated with various teams and what happened in the process. What was the challenge? How did you solve it? How did you bring everyone together? There could be questions about, tell me your success and failures and what contributed to the success and failure of your product or a project. Tell me an example. It's not to assess whether you were successful or you failed. If you failed, it's fantastic. It is good news, because failure teaches a lot from a hiring manager's perspective. If someone has been successful throughout, sometimes it becomes a challenge, saying that, come on, are you saying that you've never failed? It's impossible. There is failure. It's just that either you're not realizing, or it's not really big enough that you have not brought it up. Everyone goes through failures, whether it's personal life or in professional life. There'll be something, right? It may be small or big. So they're looking for such patterns of what's your personality, what makes you as a person fit for this role, right? So it's important, again, to understand different stakeholders in the organization, whether it could be sales, product marketing, your leaders, engineering counterparts, your designers, your writers, or people who manage the technical documentation, installation guides, and so on. It is people who are managing partners and tech alliances. It could be many others with whom you will need to work. And as part of that, empathy becomes important, right? When you're working with everyone in the organization, you are required to switch your shoes, switch your mental model in every conversation. In 1 hour, you're having a conversation with a partner, with a internal, either a partner or a partner team. And the next, you're talking to a customer. Next, you're talking to a developer. Now, the empathy aspect is not just for customers, of understanding, okay, what is a problem for them and what we need to solve. It's also internally, what do they expect? How do I make them successful, right? What is required for them? So these are some of the things that may be assessed as part of the interview, if you will fit into the role and the organization. And sometimes it's termed as a cultural fit. What is essentially cultural fit is, okay, there is an organization culture and there is a team culture. Now, organization culture is overall what the organization feels and how it operates, hierarchy and transparency, whether it's flat, what is the top-down tone of the organization, and would you fit into their overall scheme of things. And then there is a team dynamic, which is, what are the kind of people in the organization? Would you be able to work with existing people or not? Now, of course, that is not easy for you to understand. What are the kind of people that are there, and you will be working with them or not? But keep it generic. The idea is they're looking at, would you be able to collaborate? Are you a hustler? Will you be able to influence them without having an authority? And some of them are very senior people than you might be, and some of them are very junior. Now you'll have to influence them to do whatever is required. The decision, saying no, and some of these aspects. Now, since some of these requests and pressure comes from your seniors in the organization, right, in that role, there will be some questions to understand, are you able to say no to things, or you just because someone senior, maybe a CEO is asking, or a VP is asking, or someone from sales is pushing down, and you just do it because it's coming from someone senior, you think, oh, it may be right. One thing I've learned, and many people have told me this during my early stage of the career, is you're performing a role of a product manager. Does not matter who is asking you to do things, you still have to do things right for the product, for your product. So if it's not right, you have to push back, doesn't matter who it is, even if it's a customer, even if it's a partner, even if it's an analyst, even if it's your CEO, you should be able to push back reasonably, politely, in a nice way, with data and why you think. Even after that, they may override it and say, hey, this is what needs to be done, which is perfectly fine. But you should have that thing of saying no when it is required, not for the sake of saying no all the time. So some of the questions may come trying to assess that aspect, because if you say yes to everything, then your roadmap is messed up, because you're trying to do everything that is driven by sales or leadership. They don't understand why or how it should be done from a theme, from a market. It'll be a challenge. So for a product leader, you should be able to easily navigate that in an organization. And in a larger organization, it is even more complex with the number of people that are there. Another aspect is you can never keep everyone happy as a product leader. Very rarely everyone is going to be happy, because you're expected to say no to many things, right? So there will be someone who's always unhappy with it. Are you ready to deal with it? Are you a person with a personality who's trying to always please everyone? This is important when you try to move from other roles into PM, because as a developer, sometimes, or in the engineering background or other roles, what usually happens is if you're working with a product manager, whatever product manager asks, you just do it. Whatever your seniors say, you do it. But as soon as you move into product leader role, you can't continue to do what you did earlier, to say yes because my product manager or product owner asked me to do it. I just did it because they're the one who owns the requirements. Now the world has changed. There will be questions to assess these as part of the interview. Okay, I'm not saying all of these questions will come in one interview. It may come. It depends on the hiring manager. It depends on the organization, and it depends on the number of rounds as well. Some organizations have a lot of rounds, some just 2, some 3, some 7, some 10. Each person will try to assess you from a different perspective, and some people will try to assess you on the same thing just to get different opinions from different managers. Okay. Now, you also have to prepare for interviews where there are multiple rounds, because there are people who may be interviewing you engineering side. So what engineering expects is different. So your same answer will not work. If your hiring manager is interviewing you, who's a head of products, that response will be very different from engineering. So you'll have to figure out what that is, what their expectation would be from that perspective. There'll be someone from design who may interview you. There'll be someone from sales who may interview you. Someone from marketing may interview you. Each one is expecting something different, because they're looking at, okay, I need to work with this person. Once this person is on board, will I be able to work with? So they're looking at things very specific to how your interaction with them would be. Okay. Now, a few things that I've called out over here, which is, some of it I've already mentioned. Your resume becomes important. Please avoid typos. in resume. I still see a lot of resumes which have typos, alignment issues. It's not formatted well. The choice of fonts, there are different fonts being used, colors. So you have to pay attention to your resume. Is the first thing anyone sees, and as I said, 1 to 2 seconds to screen. Unless you're going through a referral, because of referral there may be a little more time, but otherwise that's all it is. First page, what is important to call out. So please pay more attention to it, and the resume, if possible, as much as possible, needs to exactly speak the same language as what the role is expecting. If you're trying to use the same resume for inbound, outbound, apps, platform, sorry, it's not going to make it, because expectations are different. When they review it, they're not going to find you fit and they will reject it. While it is a painful thing, I know that you have, if you have to update your resume for each type of role, then it becomes a challenge. The kind of questions that are going to come up is, do you understand PM concepts? Even if you don't have the experience, it's okay. Do you understand product management concepts? What are the things that product manager has to do? Right now, but the experience so far you have had might not have covered all the PM concepts, but you should be able to say, okay, my PM in my organization or in my previous role used to do these things. I understand, but these are other things that needs to be done, which is good, right? So there is ideally what all PM should do versus experience so far, either in PM or understanding of working with the PM is also helpful. How's your exposure in terms of SDLC methodologies, which are software development lifecycle methodologies? Because they're trying to understand, okay, we follow an agile methodology. Do this person know? Will it become hard if you don't know? In some cases, this may not be a major issue. In some cases, it becomes a really big issue because the hiring manager does not have the time to bring up the person up to speed in terms of educating about an SDLC process and working with engineering. This is again very specific to engineering execution. For an inbound role, if the engineering organization is completely tailored towards agile way of working, and if your exposure is only waterfall, which means it'll become very difficult for you to work with engineering. So the person who's interviewing you from an engineering point of view, as well as the product team, may have questions pertaining to this. If you are able to convince them, saying that even if you have not had the experience, but you know the stuff and you'll be able to pick it up and do it, which will be good. So there may be questions again pertaining to this. Watch out why they are asking this question, and you can ask them, okay, what do you follow? Right? And this may vary from team to team within an organization. It's not it may not be a standard practice. Understand the PM lingos. Now, the lingos are different in every organization, but just know common stuff that may be there in the industry. What are the exposure, the tools? Some of it you may mention in your resume in terms of, okay, how was the requirements managed? How were ideas collected? Where were the epics and stories written? What are the tools you have used for wireframing? What are the tools you have used to create videos? If it's an outbound role, right? They may be looking at, okay, what are the exposures for tools? Do you know this stuff? Are there things that you have implemented as a process improvement in your organization, even in your engineering roles, giving them an idea of, okay, you're a very process-oriented person. You put in processes whenever it's needed. But at the same time, product managers don't like a lot of processes because in many cases, it may slow things down, right? So you also, again, have to have a balance. Process is good if it's helping move things smoothly. Otherwise, it's going to slow down, and it depends on what the hiring manager is looking at there. Some things that is helpful in your conversations and as well as part of your screening is, if you make it to this beyond the screening, what are the blogs you have written? What are the if there are things that are there on your YouTube, your design examples somewhere online, you could mention these things in your resume, which helps in screening, saying that, okay, this is the blog, this is the link. So, someone will go down and start looking at it. Again, the blog has to be named appropriately because it has to talk about what the role is, and the blog is relevant to that role, right? Some of the things that they will assess you is, are you a person who shares opinion, right? Are you open to sharing opinion, but keeping a balance, right? What are what are your experiences in terms of failures and successes? How did you bounce back? What was your resilience? What did you learn from it? What was the situation during your experience, project, product, whatever that may be, right? What cost you? Do you realize it? How do you not repeat it, right? As I mentioned, everyone will call you're the CEO or the owner of the product. It's not easy. Things are flowing in from all direction. Time management becomes important. This is again an aspect that could be assessed as part of it, to say, as an individual contributor earlier, focusing on just one aspect of, okay, on the engineering side or a QA or design, one thing in the past. Now trying to look at things that are coming from all directions, from all your different functions, different stakeholders. How are you going to manage your time? How are you going to say no? How are you going to prioritize? You have to be ruthless in prioritization, right? Only then you'll be able to prioritize the most important things for that day and move forward. Okay. These are, and again, some of the common things: strong written and oral communication. Because you're interacting with all the different stakeholders in the organization, this is really important. And if it's spread across different geographies, understanding those nuances of when to use yes, when to use z, spelling nuances, how to address someone in Japan versus someone else in other country, being sensitive about how you communicate, what you say, what you ask will differ based on each geographies. Do you have some of those aspects? Are you a great storyteller? You should be great at demos, right? Are you a storyteller ultimately, right? So you'll have to also understand, okay, is that something that you have, and are you able to weave into that story to say, I got an opportunity, I did this, and because I said it in this way, everyone appreciated it, things like that. Customer empathy, again, this is just one aspect. Customer empathy, understanding, listening, and hearing what the customer is saying, doing, looking for, and what they are saying may be very different from what they actually need. So you should be able to understand and extract what actually is the problem, because every time customer is not saying the problem, they'll say, okay, I would want this button here, but that's not the solution. So look for that, understand why they're asking that, go dig a little deeper, not just take it based on what they're saying, right? Empathy, not just for customers, partners, and everyone internally, including your engineering organization. Are you that? You have to be, business and tech savvy, track metrics, understand how things work in the organization. Do you know how many customers are there for your products? Who are your competitors? What is the trend? What is the revenue? Are you ready for that? Do you have exposure of that even in your previous role at a decent level? Experience working with engineering team is crucial for an inbound role. Are you a risk taker, right? Examples where you took a risk. It doesn't matter whether you succeeded or failed, but what is your personality? Because as part of your role, you're required to take risks, which is what you do as part of your roadmap, even design decisions to say, I don't know, should I provide upgrade or not upgrade? Should I ask customers to pay or not pay? All these are risks. It could be small or big. What kind of person are you? Right? These are things that could be assessed. Again, all of this is depend on what is the type of role that is it a junior or a senior, and what level of risks will change, right? Ability to manage your stakeholders, work with across the team, as I mentioned, ability to influence others. You are a leader. You are doing what is right for the product. You should be able to multitask and change your shoes as needed. You should be ready to roll up the sleeves from an execution point of view, get to the details of this field, this with this border, this is the pixel, to 3 to 5 year strategy for your leaders, or a C-suite conversation outside the organization. You should be able to do all of this in the next, let's say in 3 hours in a day. 1 hour could be execution, 1 hour could be working on 3 year to 5 years. Yeah. Are you ready for it? Juggle, right? Ruthless prioritization, as I mentioned. It's a fine balance of aggression, passion, and staying grounded. Staying humble is very important because you have to work with every organization. You don't want people to say you're hard to work with, but at the same time, not easy. That everything that they ask, you'll get it done. So you need to have a balance of that. And some of these things will be assessed as part of it. There will be a lot of chaos in a product manager's life. You all know. And will you thrive in that chaos? Will you organize that chaos, right? Believes in learning never stops. It's a lifelong learning. I keep learning and it never stops, right? And get better at it every time, whether it's presentation, whether it's domain, whether it is what's happening new in technology, whatever that is, right? Having a growth mindset, which is continuous learning and not believing that, okay, I'm done, I'm the best. It never ends. There's always something to get better at it, right? Experience is everything. So a lot of questions will be pertaining to your experience, cultural fitment, how you look at data and insight, understanding psychology. Psychology becomes a very important aspect as part of understanding your customers, understanding your buyer, understanding your user, understanding your psychology of your developers to internal people, what they expect, how you enable them, because ultimately it's all about working with people. How do you define your minimum viable product ruthlessly and able to convince everyone? So there may be examples of saying, okay, there is a product you want to launch, what would be your MVP, right? And how do you go about thinking about that MVP? How do you decide this is more important than this? Examples will be asked to understand your experiences and how you go about thinking it, right? Again, resilience. How do you deal with success and failure? You don't have to be great at everything. No one is great at everything. No one knows it all. But how do you look at things? What is your perspective? What is your opinion? At the last, be resourceful to everyone, because everyone is going to come and ask, oh, there is a deal. Can you send me materials? Can you get on a customer call because there is an escalation? There is a deal. Can you come and show me what's coming as part of the next roadmap? I want a product to be named this way. Can you help? It could come from any direction. None of these are planned, but help everyone to move forward along, right? If you've done all of that in your existing role, though it was not expected, bring those things as well, so that they know that you are not just looking at only from your team perspective. You want to help everyone in the organization, be resourceful to everyone, right? Yeah, I know we're on almost 4 minutes over. Thank you so much for your time, and my apologies again for the technical glitch. I'm glad we were able to bounce back and have the session. If there are questions, we'll take. Otherwise, if time is not there, then you can shoot me your questions, or we can have a follow-on session.
Thank you very much, Aneesh. That was a very, very informative and insightful session on hiring product managers. I think there was it was full of empathy as well. And like you said, a lot of passion in how you do things. We do have a lot of questions. but I don't know if we have the time to take them all. So we probably can look at answering some of those after the panel discussion. But I would just like to check with you on one which is specifically on resume building.
Yeah.
This has come on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
We have Shruti Subramanya. She's really happy to have joined the session. She says your talk was great, and she wants just a few questions regarding resumes for PM interviews. She said, "I hear different opinions on usage of PDF or Word document,
Mhm.
considering ATS usage. Which
Yeah.
one do you think would be preferred format?" That's
Uh,
one.
See, Word is more friendly because the tracking systems, the resume applications do better job in dealing with Word than PDF. Now, what happens is with PDF is sometimes it becomes like a text file, so it's not readable. It's not your fault. It's not the candidate's fault, but how the application stores that information. So Word is more safer than PDF. If you're sharing, I mean, always, because unfortunately the technology is not there yet where these applications do a good job with rendering PDF. Very few do good job. Safer is Word, in my opinion.
Great. And the next one is it okay to bold important text within experience apart from bolding job title company headers?
Absolutely, right? But at the same time, don't overdo it because then the whole thing has to be bold and we'll have to read.
Great.
Pick few things that are important because while you're scanning, you want five things, six things to highlight. Bold only those things.
Okay, do you think a single page resume divided into two columns is preferred? Would the ATS recognize this aptly, or is it better to utilize horizontal manner of writing?
Yeah, it's a great question because one side you want your resume to stand out. If you want a resume to stand out, you want it to be crisp, which means you're cutting down from 2 3 pages to one page. But at the same time, you're trying to balance between what the resume tracking system can do. I think it has gotten better now. It'll get better with two columns. I've not seen an issue with dealing with two column layouts. So I think it's safe to err on having a good looking resume, and if that needs two columns, stick to that because otherwise your resume is going to look very similar to what everyone has. How are you going to stand out?
Great, thank you. And one more, I think we'll just make this very quick, though being a very informative session, yes, there are a lot of questions, but due to constraint of time, we can't take all. One more coming up. How do you see a difference in roles and responsibility of an inbound PM and an engineering managers, keeping the recruitment aside?
So what if I understood the question, what is the difference between engineering manager and product manager, inbound product manager? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
she's
Yeah.
saying difference in roles and responsibilities of an inbound product manager and an engineering
Okay.
manager, keeping the recruitment aside. That is from Smita.
Yeah, Smita. Great question. Lot of difference. The inbound product manager is still working with customers. Engineering manager does not. Is usually shielded from customer conversations, implementations. Engineering manager is focused on doing the development right. What is required is done from engineering, architecture, processes, um, and being aligned with what product manager needs. The product manager is focusing on bringing the customers' requirements, so interacting with customers, partners, and everything else, even though it is inbound, and then taking that and translating into epics, sprints, stories, along with engineering. It's not a standalone work, being a partner together. So the expectation is very different. Engineering is completely inbound of inbound, I would say. Get pulled into only a few customer escalations and conversations, support type of things, but more focused on building a great and right product from an engineering perspective, right? Motivating the team and ensuring have the right culture and things like that. Apart from hiring and stuff, product manager, uh, writing requirement is just one aspect. Writing a requirement or a document for engineering is just one aspect of a product manager's role. There are a lot of other things that happen in product manager's life. Um, so it becomes overwhelming many times. And I've had product managers who have struggled, who moved from different roles, even as a product owner, as an internal tool, moving into product manager role, struggling in because of feeling overwhelmed. There is a lot of attention because you're interacting with your seniors. An engineering manager might not be interacting with your chief operating officer or a chief marketing officer or a marketing counterpart or VP of sales. Product manager is an ability to say no, ability to manage their expectations, stakeholders. Engineering manager is managing stakeholders within the engineering organization, and the product manager is one of the stakeholders, right? So there are quite a few differences in what each one does.
Anish, thank you so much. But well, we can go on because there are a lot of questions coming in. But this is quite a relevant one, so if we can take this quickly. What is the future of product managers? How the demand will be? How is the demand going to be in the future?
Demand is always going to be there. I know there is a conversation about will artificial intelligence replace product managers as a topic. Never, right? We can't depend on the customer empathy. Artificial intelligence cannot bring in. Understanding these aspects, you need a product manager. So product manager role will be required more. And in India specifically, we have already seen the shift from services to product, and we're building all great products across all domains. And next to Silicon Valley, India has taken space. Israel is already there, but product managers are required. And I've seen that trend. As I said, right, there were 200 product managers, very few software product managers, and now so many product managers, so many product companies. It is growing a lot. So this is not something that's going to go away. For building the right product, you need a product manager. A founder of an organization could develop as a product manager for some time, but there will be a time where the founders have to start focusing on even building the business. So they have to give away the product role to someone, a product manager, hire someone as a product manager to run it after a point in time. So product manager is a critical part of the business. It will grow. You will have more product managers, product manager roles in every organization. You see services now having product managers because services are having product divisions. They're introducing products. Product managers are there as well. So more demand.
Great, thank you. That was from Pawan. That's good news for everybody who's here on this info session, that yes, product managers are not going to go away, and definitely not in a hurry. And I think it's just beginning to, I think, look up, and I think it's being recognized. Yeah. Great, Anish. Thank you very much for joining us today. That was a fabulous session, and I'm really sorry. There's a lot of questions, but we cannot take them due to time constraint.
Thanks for having me, and my apologies. We lost significant time because of technical glitches. If there is another session that's needed, we can do it to answer some questions in the future. My apologies again for losing some time because of technical glitch. Thanks.
Not at all. That was worth it. I think once you came on, I think there's a lot of clarity, and I think lots that people wanted to know. Fantastic info session. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for joining us today once again.
Thank you so much.